Hello, everybody. Good evening. Happy Sunday evening. It is August the 20th, and I have your sports update for you for the weekend. Dusty Baker here out of Wave Sports. We've had a very busy sports weekend, specifically because of high school football and what action we saw this weekend. It was incredibly exciting, of course, just seeing some of the athletes in the area competing on the biggest stage, taking a look at just some of what we saw over the weekend. Of course, we saw Christian Academy come out strong, dominant over Owensboro, a huge win for them. We also saw a huge win for Trinity as well. Nice win for them at home. And then when you look at the breakdown of some of the big games of the weekend, Manual dominated over Central. I think that's something we didn't really see coming necessarily. You also saw St. X. They delivered in a big way, a huge win for them at home against Floyd Central. And then there were just some great plays, including Male High School pick six. We saw that to kind of open things up. Big weekend also on Saturday. We saw some incredible plays, including from North Oldham taking on Fern Creek, North Oldham winning that game. And then we saw a crazy game between Atherton and KCD, ultimately KCD with the victory. There were plenty of other games as well that we could highlight all day, but that's the gist of what you saw over the weekend. But what a great opening weekend we had. And now you have control because we will have our player of the week announced on our very next Football Friday night. And super excited for that because we are going to, of course, do this repetitively. This is paired with Furniture Fair. These players that are named player of the week, they'll actually get their own chair as well as part of this. And with that, of course, we're also partnered with Beer Nose, who sponsors this podcast, the Kendrick and Dusty Talk Sports Podcast. So thank you to Furniture Fair and Beer Nose for their participation and help and support of Touchdown Friday night and, of course, the Kendrick and Dusty Talk Sports Show. But you have the chance to be able to get these kids the recognition they deserve. We will have 5 candidates for you tonight at 11 o'clock on our 11 o'clock broadcast. You won't want to miss it. And if you do, well, we will have them posted on our website. And we'll have those 5 candidates announced. Then you can vote for them all the way up until noon on Wednesday. And then we'll have our announcement. That will be on Friday night, the upcoming Friday night for week 2. And pretty simply, I'm just going to throw this out there. You can vote for any of the 5. I highly recommend voting for the one that, in your eyes, deserves it the most, because obviously sometimes people will vote for the people that, or the players that they love the most, and that's perfectly fine if that's who you want. If you've got a child that's nominated, obviously go vote for them because they clearly deserve to be in the top 5. But this is your opportunity to have a voice and find the player that you believe deserves it the most, and this is week 1 of that. So really excited to be able to have the high school football season kicked off. It was my first Friday night lights here in Kentucky, and needless to say, it was a really special opportunity. I had the chance to go to St. X, also had the chance to go to South Oldham to watch that North Oldham versus Fern Creek game, and I was at the Manual Central game. So kicking things off right away with 6 prolific high schools in the area, that was pretty fun for me to be able to see that. And if there's a game of the week also you guys think that we should be going to this week, because we have our game of the week every week, feel free to leave that in the comments. We will take that into consideration. And if there's any great stories that you think we should be covering, you can message us or find us on Twitter as well at Wave News Sports. You can also find me on Twitter, the X app, if you will, right here at Dusty Baker TV. You can find Kendrick Haskins at Kendrick Haskins as well. Kendrick will be back with this podcast later this week. He and I should be together on Wednesday as well. As for the rest of the action going on here in Louisville and, of course, in the greater area, the talk is football at this time. And let's be honest, a lot of the attention has been around Jeff Brom and his squad for U of L. And rightfully so, because a lot of people are wondering what exactly do we expect this time around? And pretty simply, we're going to find out in not very long. It's the 20th today. U of L kicks off against Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and that'll be the Aflac kickoff game. And so, needless to say, they'll be on the national stage, new team. And the biggest thing is, how will Jack Plummer, the transfer quarterback out of both Purdue and Cal, how will he fare as the leader of this squad? Jeff Brom talking a little bit after their second scrimmage on Saturday about the team as a whole and about how Jack looks at this time.
Long scrimmage and something we needed. Like everything, there was some good, there were some bad moments that we definitely got to clean up. So it's good to see that. But we had a lot of game-like situations and team settings and good and bad. So I just think we got to look at the film and clean some things up. But I do think our guys played hard and we made improvement as the scrimmage went on. As we start the game plan for Georgia Tech in more detail, we narrow things back quite a bit. But I think Jack's strengths are, man, he can lead the team. He can direct the offense. He's smart. When we have some penalties and some things set us back, he's got to be smart and not try to do too much. And I think sometimes that can happen to a good quarterback when you're trying to impress. But he's got to take what the defense gives him. And we've got to be smart with our play calling and do what he does best.
I think it's safe to say that Jack is still in the works right now at the moment, and we've seen some positives, some highs and lows from Jack. The big question, I guess, that we have at this time simply can be, is he going to produce on the big stage? He hasn't really had the opportunity to play on the big stage yet, and he's going to get that week one. When he faces a decent Georgia Tech team, who, by the way, I mean, this is in Atlanta, so this is in their backyard. Jack Plummer is going to have to step up. And ultimately, we'll see what U of L does as a whole. But that offense, there's a lot of expectation there. And the hope for many fans is that there's a significant step forward, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. I will say this, Jeff Brom, after their first scrimmage, he had said the defense did not look particularly great. And this second time around, he had mentioned the defenses step up a little more. Obviously, only one side can win on every given play, right? And so he had basically stated that this is a team that looks like they're somewhat ready. They're kind of locking in now, figuring out positions. I think it's important to note that he has mentioned Georgia Tech is now the focus as they head into their first true week of practice. So school for U of L begins tomorrow. And that means that U of L will be practicing in the evening. They will be practicing tomorrow at 4 p.m. But now it's the kind of the time where they have to lock in. And for U of L, it's going to be an interesting chapter as we are less than 2 weeks away until kickoff for their upcoming season. Meanwhile, Kentucky, also another transfer quarterback. How about that? We got kind of similar storylines for both squads, except for the different coach, of course. Mark Stoops in his 11th season. And Stoops talking a little bit more about how practice is going, how they're kind of setting Devin Leary up, the transfer from NC State, how his comfort level is, and more importantly, what they're doing to get him in a comfortable spot.
Nothing, overly dramatic to report. We're relatively healthy. The playmakers made some plays and both sides did some good things. So did some red zone, 2-point, coming off the goal line, 4-minute, 2-minute. So a lot of situational work. It was good. Guys were energetic, focused. And so overall, pleased.
You got to love coach talk right there. Of course, when you look at where Devin Leary is at right now, he's coming off of a right torn pectoral muscle. And so he had shoulder surgery. Ultimately, though, he's looking sharp. You see him right there, number 13, delivering couple strikes. And I think the big thing that a lot of Kentucky fans are hoping for is just to have a clean year offensively and have a dynamic where it's not just run heavy. Of course, losing Rodriguez was kind of tough for them. And we'll see how this transition works. But the defense should be better. I think the offensive line is going to be the big question because they allowed the most sacks this past season. So could be a bit of a challenge for them if they don't figure that out as opposed to what they did last year. We talked a lot about football. Let's talk about football. How about soccer in Louisville, and specifically Racing Louisville? What a crowd they had on hand last night when they hosted Angel City. And specifically Racing Louisville, they were down 1-0. And it was a huge goal that they had late in the match. It was Kirsten with a header on in, but it was Picorni, ultimately, Maddie Picorni, that delivered the assist that led to Kirsten knocking that thing in, Kirsten Davis, that is. And she spoke a little bit about what the impact actually from the crowd had on their result.
This record-breaking attendance is everything, it's tough to be out there sometimes, but with the adrenaline of the crowd, it takes you further than ever. So I think the energy that the crowd was giving us allowed us to score that goal and try to find the back of the net again. But luckily we found at least one.
Yeah, they found at least one. That was a tie for them, so a 1-1 draw. And for Racing Louisville, they have all their pieces back now. Of course, they had quite a few, 6 players out at the World Cup, so returning home to their safety in Louisville, it's welcomed in open arms because this team, I think, has kind of been dearly missing some of those pieces. Savannah DeBello being a key piece, and we saw her in the action. It's just nice to see the return of the actual full roster. So you'll expect maybe a little more consistency from this team down the stretch. Speaking of consistency, how about a 4-game undefeated streak? Well, Lou City had not been playing particularly well. Then they go on this 4-game streak. However, their most recent one was a draw in which they probably should not have allowed 2 goals. Instead, here they come into this weekend on the road at Birmingham. And I'll just put it this way. Coach Danny Cruz has not been particularly happy multiple times. I would say this, I've heard kind of similar sound bites, similar responses from him about his team just not being out there mentally, not providing essentially the aggressiveness, or I would even just say having mental lapses, kind of being lazy. His soundbite following this match after falling 2-0 to Birmingham was not a great one for Blue City players.
Thought the mentality was really, really poor tonight. Really, really frustrated with that. Felt really happy with how we had been progressing the 4 games prior. But too many guys tonight didn't have, what I asked them to have, which was that fight, the belief, the mentality. But I think it was clear when you look at the game over 90 minutes, it was nowhere near good enough.
Wow. Very tough break, I would say, for them. They did look flat. That squad did not look good. They were not in the game at any point in time. They allowed a goal in the 5th minute, and they were just kind of chasing from that point on. So Lou City has been really hard to track this year. They're very streaky is the best way to put it. And so we'll keep our eyes on them as we get down the stretch here as well with them. But I will say, I mean, that's not what you want to hear from a manager, of course. Especially when you're this late in the season. And there's really no excuses either why they're playing the way they are. And Birmingham is at their number, by the way. That's the team that beat them prior to that 4-game undefeated streak. So needless to say, Lou City needs to get over that hump. And they're just kind of playing down to the competition that is underneath them in the standings, and then they're not really able to compete at the teams that are above them. It's kind of the way that we've noticed it. It's a bit of a trend, unfortunately. One last thing I'll have for you before I turn things over to Jessica Dobson, who will give you our weather update in just a moment here. One thing that I enjoy about being in Louisville is having a AAA team. That's the Louisville Bats. And Kendrick and I all summer really have been talking about the Bats and the players that they've had coming up. And, none of them are going up and down. They're going up and up. And so they come up from Chattanooga, and then they perform for a little bit, and then they go all the way to the MLB. We saw that again this weekend. Noel V. Marte, top Reds prospect, may have slipped under our noses here. I actually had the chance to go one-on-one with him about a month and a half ago. And basically, he struggles with English a little bit, but in essence, he was really a great interview and had the chance to get to know him a little bit better. His focus was on getting to the Reds, and his ETA, according to MLB.com, was 2024. Instead, he gets the call this weekend, and Sunday, he had the chance to make his debut. He went 0 for 3 initially, and then in his 4th at-bat, he gets a base hit to the right side. He sneaks past the second baseman, and Noelvi, showing his athleticism, he's able to leg it out for a double. And I think that's what the Reds fans need to keep an eye out for, is they've got so many athletes. I mean, so many athletes and guys that can produce and guys that can play the infield. I envision that Noel V is going to be the third baseman of the future for that squad. But what a performance just to watch that at the end. He didn't look particularly sharp in his first 3 at-bats. That's to be expected. I mean, this is the MLB. It's a huge step up. But now you're looking at it, and that's a team primarily comprised of rookies. I mean, really, you have Joey Votto, Jonathan India, and a ton of rookies. Spencer Steer, Ellie De La Cruz, Matt McClain, Noel V. Marte, Christian Encarnacion Strand. I mean, this is crazy how much the Reds have done in such a short period of time to develop a team that should be good, not just for the short term, but really down the stretch, long term. This could be a really, really solid team. Of course, the only problem with that is they're going to have extensions and contract talk all at the same time. So something to keep in mind probably in the next 5 years. But let's live in the present. Okay, let's live in the present. This is an awesome ball club to be a fan of. And you're seeing guys like Stuart Fairchild. You're also seeing guys like TJ Friedel. I personally have enjoyed Jake Fraley up until this point with his injury. And you're seeing DJ Hopkins getting involved as well. All these guys that contributed at AAA here in Louisville, they're now doing it at the big show. And it's been an honor to be able to watch them and tell some of their story as well. And I'm going to try to continue to do in the dugout with Dusty Baker as we move forward, even with football season here, because there's some great stories there. And if you get the chance before the season comes to a close, I'll tell you this, the Bats only have a short amount of time left before their regular season comes to an end. Well, speaking of come to an end, that will do it for our sports update over the weekend. Of course, keep an eye on Kendrick and myself on social media. You can find me at Dusty Baker TV on Twitter or at the X as well, whatever you want to call it. You can find me right there. Kendrick Haskins, you can find him at Kendrick Haskins. And then you can also find the both of us on our Wave Sports app, or our Wave Sports Twitter account, I should say. And that is at Wave News Sports. So with that being said, thank you all for watching. And make sure if you have any comments, questions, concerns, you can tweet at us, comment at us on these live Facebook feeds, YouTube feeds, whatever it may be, Twitter feeds. We will be receptive and respond to you accordingly. With that being said, I'm going to toss things over in just a moment here. You're going to have Jessica Dobson taking over, and she will give you your weather forecast as things are heating up a little bit this week. So with that being said, hope y'all have a great rest of your weekend. Have a great evening. Take care, everybody.